So get ready for another dynamic journey as we wake up the world to a new era of opportunities and empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, President Larry Iverson.
Good morning. Good morning. It is your girl, your person. No, I'm not. I'm just everybody's loving person this morning. It's Happy Saturday, LaDonna Ray, with Ray Consulting and the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. And I am the co host too, Larry Ivory. But I want to welcome you first before I bring Mr. Ivory on. Welcome to the Wake Up Show Chicago. This show is powered by the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce, but it is sponsored by Wind Creek Casino Southland. That's right. Get on out there and get your membership right here at ilbcc.org for the chamber and get your membership at the Wind Creek Casino. Each and every Saturday, we are here at 9 a.m. We're coming to you live on WVON 1690 a.m. and we're streaming everywhere in the world on iHeartRadio. You can also catch us on YouTube and Facebook Live. Woo, try saying that 3 times. Now, write this number down. It's 773-591-1690. In fact, you can start dialing it as soon as you put it into your phone because we want you to dive in with us live on the show. But before we dive in, I have to introduce our man, the man who I am co-host to, and that's the leader in Black business advocacy, serving as the president and CEO of the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce and also chairman of the board of the National Black Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C., Mr. Larry Ivory. Good morning, Mr. Ivory.
Good morning, Donna Ray, and to our listening audience. It is always a great day when we start off with your enthusiasm and, the content that we're going to be talking about today. One of the things, LaDonna, that the chamber has always focused on, it's a chamber of commerce. We deal with commerce, and our goal is very clear: is to help Black businesses get to another level, and that requires all kinds of things. And the fact of the matter is, we probably need more help than we got, but nonetheless, this is the environment we're in. So today, what I want to engage in, LaDonna, is a conversation, about procurement, because I think procurement and our participation um, in state contracts or corporate contracts or any contracts is essential to our own survival. And as we often say, no money, no mission. And today we're going to try to crack this nut in reference to procurement and kind of have just some broad conversation and some specific conversation. So I want our listening audience to listen in, and we hope that we impose questions that lead us to a better understanding about procurement. How do we make it work for us, and make it happen? So that's
Mhm.
what we're going to do today. So,
So when
Ladonna.
you say procurement, I just want to be clear so that our audience understands. We're talking about agencies like IDOT, IDOR, which is IDOR, Illinois Department of Revenue, Illinois Department of Corrections, Do It, and all the other major state agencies funded by our tax dollars.
Absolutely, Don. That's exactly
Mhm.
what we're talking about. These agencies get a significant amount of money. And what we try to do from a chamber is take a look at the agencies and take a look at their spend in terms of what's subject to a BEP goal. And BEP is, stands for business enterprise. And it's a certification where, they take a look at diversity spend overall. So if you take a look at the Department of Corrections as an example, and we're going to talk about the Department of Correction today in terms of their numbers, but as an example, the Department of Correction may have a budget of $2 billion, and this is fairly close. But let's say they got a budget of $2 billion. Of that $2 billion and all of the contracting that they do, whether it be commissary, whether it be building a new jail, whether it be doing anything that the facility needs, whether it's healthcare, because they have healthcare in the prison, all those things are part of what they contract out for some things they do in house and some things they do outside. And when you're doing outside, that means that you are putting it out for a bid or it's sole source, but it's some form of procurement that they are buying goods and services from a particular group or from a particular corporation, company, or something in that regard. So when we take a look at a $2 billion budget, or close to a $2 billion budget, we take a look at of that $2 billion, how much of that actually goes to African Americans. And I think why the Department of Correction is important to talk about is that, when we take a look at the correction um, department in the state of Illinois, unfortunately, a lot of people who look like us, LaDonna,
Mm-hmm.
are in prison. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
fact. They're in prison. They're doing their time. In some cases, as we know, the legal system isn't perfect. And sometimes they make a mistake. Not all the time, but sometimes they make a mistake. So there's some people who may be unjustly incarcerated, or maybe some people who get a much stiffer sentence in terms of somebody else. And that's not what we're going to get into today. But what we're really getting right down to is that how much of that spend comes to Black businesses. And what we found out when we went down to lobby day, and I want the listening audience to hear this, and I need people's input at the same time to see if it's as alarming as it is to me. But we found out that only $1.8 million, Madonna, of all they procure goes to African Americans. But African Americans probably represent over 50% of the prison population. And if you're talking about recidivism, when people come out, they need a job and an opportunity. And the fact of the matter is that when we take a look at what we do with the Department of Correction, $1.8 million, it is insignificant in reference to the overall budget.
And it actually, as of June 2024, according to the Illinois Eagle, the prison population is a total of was a total of 29,155 individuals, and out of this number, 15,883 inmates, which is approximately, as you stated, 54.5% that are Black.
Man, 54.5% who are Black. Okay. And so when you take 54% that are Black, then you take the amount of business that they do with Black companies, and you find out that if you take a look at the total budget, say the total budget is $2 billion approximately, and we're doing 1.8 million, that's less than 0.85%, not
Mhm.
even 1% when you get right down to it.
Now, Larry, does our audience or our business audience know or understand that the Illinois Department of Corrections can work with them also, because they have contracts based on food services, maintenance. There's a whole lot of different services that would incorporate a lot of the Black businesses that are out here that may not know that they could be part of those procurement opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon us, and that's why we try to have the conversation. I think most people know in business that there are opportunities with the Department of Corrections. And I think that people may not understand what it takes to do business with the Department of Corrections, but they surely understand that Department of Corrections is buying goods and services on an ongoing basis. I think what our challenge is that how do we justify that? I mean, what seems to be the problem? And those are the questions that we ask, heads of HC, because Latoya Hughes is the acting director of the Department of Corrections, and she has an APO. I can't remember the young lady's name, but she's the APO, and the APO is the agency procurement officer who has what you would say, the ultimate responsibility for procurement, just
Mhm.
like the CPO has collective ultimate authority on procurement. And the CPO, just for the audience, because, It's an area that we're familiar with, but we want to make sure that the audience follows. CPO is the Chief Procurement Officer. APO is the Agency Procurement Officer. And their ultimate job is to make sure they procure uh, goods and services. And they have, to some degree, a lot of influence on what happens within that procurement from the beginning to the end of the process. And there is a sister who's the head of who's the APO for the Department of Corrections. I can't think of her name now, but we may be able to pull it up at some point in time here because it's important for people to know people's name, who has a role of responsibility. But we do have African Americans who are in leadership. But when we take a look at the results, I don't think that we could be happy with the results of less than 1% participation over the overall budget. And then if you you break that down even more and say, what's, what procure, mean, how much spend is available to put a goal on it, because you can't put a goal on what you call payroll. Payroll is exempt,
It's
so
not
there's
part
no
of
goal.
it.
It's not a part
Mhm.
of. But in
Mhm.
spite of that, those numbers that we see with the Department of Correction, $1.8 million is insignificant, and it's just about an insult. And some people need to be held accountable, from my perspective, and we need to sit down with the Department of Correction to figure out what's going wrong and how do we improve those numbers, because that's what the ultimate goal is, LaDonda, is how do we put more money into Black people's hand. I mean, that's what we're trying to do.
We've got a couple of callers, Larry. Let's go to Kay. Good morning, Kay. Welcome to the Wake Up Show Chicago on WVON.
Good morning. Good morning, LaDonna. I always like to hear you during the week.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
morning, Mr. Ivory. I had a question, and I know y'all do state, but I went to an alderman's meeting, and they were saying how, as citizens, we have to wait for services. We have to wait for tree trimming. We have to wait for street repair. We have to wait. Can they hire private companies to do that as contractors?
That's what most of them do, is that they do hire private companies. They have a contract that they put out for tree trimming, for a number of things when you at the city, county, and state level. So there are contracts that are contracted out most of the time for those services, without a doubt.
Okay, that was my question because it doesn't seem like in our community they're contracted out because we're still waiting for services. So I'll look into that to see, if some of the companies that we have in the community that are lawn care and concrete or whatever fix the street, that they can get on those, and that would help the percentages that you're looking for.
Well, thank you, Kay. Thank you. Larry, we're going to go to the next caller. We have Brian on the line. Good morning, Brian. Welcome to the Wake Up Show Chicago on WVON.
Hi, my name is Michael.
Oh, sorry. I read it wrong. Hi, Michael. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm former legislative staffer for Illinois General Assembly Connie Howard. We had the same issue 2 decades ago with the Illinois Prison Department. Your president is absolutely correct. 1 point something million is minuscule. I learned a long time ago that Billy Bob no longer farms. They guard us. Out of the 15,000, 54% of us are there. So I don't understand why there has not been a change. It seems to me that, we used to have 19 Black members out of 116, I think, that are in the legislature. I understand that, and I hope you understand and people do understand that Lobby Day is a good thing, but that has to happen in January. That has to happen in March. That definitely has to happen in May, because actually the budget is supposed to be done by Memorial Day. So the question becomes, why is it that there is still the minuscule amount of business the amount of business going to black folks? It
Well,
seems that the governor's office should be contacted. I mean, this man may run for president. What about Miss Stratton, Mrs. Stratton? She's lieutenant governor. It would seem to me that black folks in government, specifically since we have put them there, would be advocates for black business people. So I don't understand why after 20 years, you're still dealing with not getting paid.
All right, Michael. So let's give Larry a chance to respond. Thank you so much, Michael.
Would you hold on so that I can respond back?
sure, absolutely, Michael. So Michael, you and I are on the same page, and that's why the chamber brings these issues up because obviously we represent a significant portion of the population. Uh, in some cases, unfairly, as a rule of thumb, but it's also complicates the problem when we don't have the opportunity to employ our own people when they get out of the Department of Correction because it leads back to recidivism. Because when people come out, if they have a job, an opportunity, a car, and they can take care of themselves, then they're not likely to go back into doing something that it will end up put them back into the system. So if we're talking about reducing,
I am, you know what? Let me just say this: the WVON audience.
Well, wait, Michael. We
We
gotta
took
let
down
Larry
to
land that
Springfield.
plane, Michael. Let him land, and then we can come back. Because remember, we said we would
Okay,
hold it so you
great.
could respond. Go ahead, Larry. Sorry
All
about
right,
that.
thank you.
so Michael, going back to what I'm saying is that it's important for us to grapple with the thing that I grapple with every day is that when I see the economic injustice of Black people across the board, our own numbers, whether it be Department of Transportation, whether it be Department of Corrections, and the reason it stays the same is because procurement is a complicated animal and nobody holds anybody accountable. Unfortunately, because it is such a complicated animal, unless you are involved in procurement, people can misdirect you and they can do a lot of things that give the illusion of progress. And I'll point this out. The Black Caucus did something pretty amazing. They had the four pillars, and part of that four pillar was that they improved BEP spend by 50%, which is historical. And the governor signed off on it. The problem is that when you take a look at that being done years ago, you take a look at the amount of being procured and it hasn't changed. So it looks good, it sounds good, but at the end of the day, there's not more money going to African American businesses. And the question that we're imposing is that why not? And what do we need to do to fix it? If we don't talk about it and make it an issue, like you said, Michael, and get down to Springfield more than once a year, but to make it a part of our objective. That's why the chamber is we asking and requested and have gotten the request received that we will be meeting with the Department of Correction on an ongoing basis to keep this issue in front, as well as put the issue out in the Black media, everything we can do to get people to understand, guys, this is something that we can fix, but we won't fix it unless we come together and recognize we got a problem. I pause there and you can respond from there, Michael, if I've answered your question.
Yes, let me just say this. The fiscal year in 2010, the operating appropriations all fund total was $52.9 billion. The general fund was $28.4 billion. Public safety is not even, I would say, 10% of out of that $52.9 billion in terms of all funds total, or the general fund, 28.4, 1 point something million is an abysmal number. Chris Welch is the Speaker of the House. it seems to me that there needs to be a conversation specifically as it concerns jobs, because Billy Bob can no longer control the jobs. What used to happen is Billy Bob no longer farms; they guard us,
Yeah.
and it sounds to me this morning that you're saying that Billy Bob also is getting the majority of contracts or subcontracts in those 43 prisons that are in the state of Illinois, where we represent 54%.
That,
So
that's the point we're making,
clearly, there needs
Michael.
to be a a a collaborative effort on a regular basis with those individuals who are in charge of your organization and those individuals who are along with the 19 people. You gotta push.
All right. So
And I know
Michael, we're gonna have to
that's
leave it
what
right
you're
there.
doing.
We're
I
gonna
thank you for your patience in terms of our conversation.
all right,
Hey,
thanks,
hey,
Mike.
Michael, and we would ask Michael. I'd love to follow up, Michael, with a more in-depth conversation because you seem to have a pretty good handle on what happens in Springfield based upon your past history. So it would be great for you to call back in, leave your number, or take the chamber's number, which is 309-740-4430. And let's make sure that this doesn't happen 10 years from now. We're having the same
Mhm.
conversation. Let's do
Absolutely.
something that addresses the issue, and let's keep our audience informed about our progress or our lack thereof of progress in terms of who's blocking. Now, let me just share this with you: is that based upon the meeting that we had with the Department of Corrections, the director, Latoya Hughes, is the acting director of the Department of Corrections, and she has a APO, which is the
I
uh,
believe is that Jacinta Wilson? Does that
yeah,
sound right? Yeah.
I think that's the sense.
Yeah.
I think you may be right.
Mhm.
And the center, the
Just
agency
Jacinta.
head, Latoya, does not necessarily understand procurement backward and forward, but the job of the APO understands procurement. And there have been a number of occasions where they could have done something that would have made a significant impact, and there was justification for not doing it. And nobody held anyone's spot. So Miss Wilson ought to be held responsible. Every black person ought to know her name. Every black person ought to basically understand that she has a job to do and she needs to explain to us and to the community, you know, that why we're not getting results. And she needs to be reaching out, not sitting back, taking it easy, while
Mhm.
we continue to be incarcerated at significant numbers and we're not getting any participation. And if you take a look at that whole system, there is that we seem to be leading the charge, but there's a significant amount of lack of black participation in other areas where decisions are being made. But the APO has a lot of power, and we need to hold her responsible, as well as the director, acting director responsible. We are going to be requesting a meeting. For those in the listening audience who want to be engaged in this effort, we would surely ask you to give us a call again at 309-740-4430. Now, LaDonna, here's the piece that I'm trying to get to, because you and I talk sometime 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night,
Man.
and we're talking about black people, black business. How do we make it better? And we have some very stimulating conversations where we're trying to get better at making an impact for black businesses. And there seems to be we seem to be in the same place, and that's what's puzzling. And I say to our listening audience, why are we in the same place that we've been 10, 15, 20 years ago, having the same conversation? There is something inherently wrong with that. When we have political figures with great deal of power, and yet we're still sitting here getting little or no participation. I give those numbers each week most of the time, until sometimes people probably get tired of hearing it. But the federal government only does 1.35% in contracts with African Americans. That's it, 1.35% on the Office of Budget and Management. And sometimes when I take a look at the procurement uh, in the state of Illinois, I see significant challenges when it comes to our participation, and we have to challenge. LaDonna, what I like to do is pivot and talk a little bit about an area that I think you have a degree of expertise in. Is that when you take a look at another area like advertising, and this is how they take the agencies, whether it be Department of Commerce, whether it be Department of Correction, whether it be IDAT, and they advertise, they spend money in advertising. And when you take a look at the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars we spend in advertising, I think it's fair to say that there's not a lot of that money, and I'm getting those numbers so we
Mhm.
can come back to the audience and give you real specific numbers in terms of how much money the state spends advertising and how much of that advertising dollars ever get to black newspaper, black radio, black TV, black radio stations. And those numbers are god awful. And unless we keep bringing these numbers to people and help people to understand that the power still lies in the hands of the people, but the people need to be informed, and we need to have a strategy. The Republicans have a strategy, they're executing it. Now, you can be mad at them if you like, but they're
Mhm.
executing their strategy. I don't agree with their strategy, but
But it was laid out. It was laid out, and now they're going down the list.
yeah, and we should have a strategy. We can't accept the fact that, hey, look, we got a 50% increase in BEP, but when you take a look at the BEP spend, nothing has really changed. How do you have a 50% increase and yet the numbers of economic participation hasn't changed? But and we have to work closely with the caucus leadership, and we have to ask them, we have to help them to understand what we see because they're so busy doing all the things that they do, and I applaud them for the work that they do. But we still have to get results. At the end of the day, business wants results.
Nice. Well, we do have a couple of callers. Actually, we have quite a few callers. And Larry, I'm just gonna grab one. I got I got Mario. Hi, good morning, Mario. Mario, you there? Can you hear? You probably there we go. I think we
Yes.
can.
Can you
There
hear
we
me? Can you
yes.
hear me?
Now I can hear you. Hi, good morning, Mario.
Yes. Good morning. Larry Ivory is a good guy. Do a lot of good work. What I'd like to add to the conversation is he's pretty much touched on all the barriers in that. But I think as a community, the reason why we're not seeing improvement, one, we have to recognize we're not here to make money, right?
Mm,
We're here to make other people money. And
Mhm.
so when you understand that the whole structure is set up on those bases, you can't be surprised to see the results that you see. But then it's a layered observation. When you look at our elected officials, if you go 20 years back and come to today, the amount of elected officials we have and the power positions that we hold, right? And then you look at the numbers that you just outlined, Mr. Avery, there's got to be some type of correlation between the number of political offices we get, which have all this leverage, but then there's no economic improvement in the communities. As a matter of fact, the economic improvement has actually diminished. And so there has to be some accountability. But why isn't there some accountability? I heard you say that we need to inform the politicians as to what we see. All these people come from the community. They know what's lacking. They know what's needed. So what is it that's causing them not to pay attention to that? What is it that's causing them not to have that as a number one focus, regardless of what their responsibilities are in these various chambers?
And Mario,
They live in the community.
I hear what you're saying, and I always push back on that when we say that they know, because they do know, but we have to hold them accountable in what they know. It's
So
almost
here's
like
what I'm saying,
expecting
though. Can I?
somebody to
Can I?
do what we think they know, and when they don't do
No,
it,
no,
now we're
no.
upset with them.
No. So what you got to understand is when you talk about politicians, when you're talking about representation,
Mm,
representatives, they all are called representatives because they represent a particular population. So you can't tell me that you represent me and then you don't go and represent me when you're in the chamber.
But they can only
So
represent you
you,
if you're in their ear. I'm just giving pushback on it. I'm never going to
no,
agree with that.
no doubt about it. It's a two-way accountability. No
Absolutely.
way about it. But what I'm saying is, so what we have to start to look at is what is it that's causing them not to be focused on, laser focused on the people that they go there to represent. I'll give you an example. So when you look at the state of Illinois, you got the Democratic Party, you got the county party. These people fund most of our politicians. These institutions. These institutions historically has never had our community at heart in terms of making sure it got what it needed. So these are the institutions that are making sure our politicians get elected for the most part. We vote for them, but they do the marketing for these people to get you to vote for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not in position to control our people from that standpoint, when they get there, they're not going to have us in their focus. They're going to have those people that put them there in their focus, even though those people persuaded us to vote for them.
All right, Mario. I'm gonna
Mario,
give,
let
let's
me
give
let
Larry
me
a
just say
chance to
this,
respond.
Mario. Let me. I think Mario. I appreciate exactly what Mario's saying, Ladonna, but let me point this out. Procurement is a very complicated animal. There are ways from the moment that a procurement decides that they're going to do a procurement. Say for first of all, the agency head has to say we need something that we need to procure, and there's several ways to procure it, from RFP, RFI, RFQ. But then they decide they need it, they got the money for it. Then you write the specs. The specs is the first area of barrier that they could use to fundamentally neutralize you. If the specs are written in such a way that most of the time you can't qualify. Now, most of the time the specs are supposed to be used based upon, making sure that you're qualified, that you can deliver the product and services. But believe me, being on the procurement policy board, being on the BEP council for as many years as I was on it, with Charlotte Roberts, with Sharon Matthews, and a host of others, what you find out is that procurement process, and I think Bruce Montgomery, who's on the Commission on Equity and Inclusion, would agree with me. The system is, they've made the system so complicated. There's levels and levels of way to stop you from even to win the contract. And the first part is writing how they write their RFQ, how they write the specs, in terms of what you have to do in order to win. That's one step. But see, since we don't understand procurement from beginning to end in terms of the APO, the SPOs, and the CPOs, and how procurement works in this process, we sometimes get what I consider to be, we give a surface look, but we haven't dug down and become a PhD in procurement. And that's why it's so important. And that's why the chamber is beginning to train young men and young women to understand procurement from beginning to end. Because if you don't understand it, because the caucus membership, they don't necessarily understand procurement. They understand procurement at a level, but when you really get down in procurement, there are many ways that you can undermine the process. And I'm gonna give a quick example, real quick. We had a gentleman who was, I'm gonna mention his name, Jesse Thomas, who does a great job. He put a lot of money into the Internal Revenue, and he was the finalist on the bid for Internal Revenue, who collects our taxes when we delinquent on our taxes. What he does is that he basically goes out and help them collect the taxes that's owed to the state. He was the finalist, and they kicked him out for two reasons. Number one, he didn't have enough experience. Okay, that's what they said. Even though he was a finalist, he should have got the contract. There's never been no black person ever in the history of the state of Illinois who's ever had a contract in that space. He was a finalist. He was our guy to get in the door. And what did they do? They denied him, and they denied him on the basis that he didn't have enough experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, well, when I got to the CPO and people, I said, well, you didn't put that in the RFP that he had to have 7 years of experience. He had 5. Well, he didn't have enough. Well, first of all, you can't deny him the opportunity because of that, because it wasn't in the RFP. So you just can't arbitrarily put it there. The second thing they said, he didn't have 3 references. Now I want you to hear what I'm saying. 3
Mm-hmm.
references.
I want to hear
He,
this.
he had And this was the only reason he was denied, to be the first African American to ever get debt collection. Those are very lucrative contracts. Only the white boys participate in, and they never had an African American, Hispanic, or anyone other than them who collected the money, making lots of money. What they said with the three um, references, he had three references, and two of them came from the University of Illinois, from different departments. And they said, because he also had a contract with the city of Chicago, he had a contract with the state of Missouri. So they said because he had two from the city of Illinois, I mean from the University of Illinois, he did not read the specs, and he was denied the opportunity. Now, when you ain't doing no, when you got no black participation, you're collecting our money, you're collecting our taxes, and you're going after us, and you got a guy, and you didn't even give him a chance to cure it. And there was no outrage. I was outraged. I fought him tooth and nail. But they continue to do what they want to do because there's no one held them accountable. If the Black Caucus would have made an issue of that, if we had informed them, we simply got to get better at this game, guys, because they're neutralizing us because we don't understand. And there should have been someone held accountable for him not participating, and there should have been heads rolling for that issue. We could take the same thing about Dr. Sterling when he competes for the business with the Department of Corrections. He won the protest. He literally won the protest. The protest
Mm.
means that you were not selected based upon this. We went to the process with the CPO. He won the protest, and guess what? The same firm that's been doing a terrible job is still doing the same terrible job,
And I have a
and black
question.
penetration is not happening.
I have a question. Was that added as an addendum or an amendment? Did they make that an amendment going forward that you can't have three or duplicate references from the same institution, or was it just a case by case in that
What
situation?
what they do, they pacify us and says, "Well, Larry, yeah, but we have to follow the guideline. We have to follow the law." And they always go back to the fact that here's what the specification says. Now, the problem is with that, the law states that at every BEP council meeting, you shall have an opportunity to address discrimination. If you find it, you shall establish a shelter mark. That's the law. Now,
Mm-hmm.
they conveniently break that all the time. But when it comes to us getting a contract, getting the door, they
Suddenly.
they want to abide by the law to the letter,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
use that as a means of but see, if we don't have people who specialize in it, there's people who know it, like Charlotte Roberts. Malcolm Weems has a great understanding of
Yeah.
procurement based upon his background and experience. But see, there's not enough of us who understand it, and so they're able to get away with things that they should never get away with. And that's why our numbers stay the same, because they're outplaying us and they're outfoxing us, and we're not getting the results. Hispanics are getting better results across the board, whether it be at Capital Development Board and other places, because they got 16, 17 people on staff. Black uh, chambers of commerce, lucky to have two or three people on staff. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a disconnect in terms of what we need to do. So I'll pause there. Let's get some more some more people on the call.
All right, Marguerite. Hi. Thank you so much for waiting. You're on the Wake Up Show Chicago with Larry Ivory and LaDonna Ray.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
Um, I want to address the caller, the woman who called about 2 calls ago, when she was saying that we don't see and we have to wait for services. If she was referring to services on the city level, well, the waiting should only be after the report is made of what it is, the request is made of what it is you need or what your neighbors need. I myself personally have seen, after calling the alderperson's office, the results within a week. I've gone down city streets where I've seen potholes, driving to work or going places. Sometimes I'll call right then and there on my cell phone or as soon as I can and report that address of where I saw a pothole. I may go a week or two later past that same location and see the city workers filling that pothole in at the address that I'd called in just days or weeks before.
Mm-hmm.
With tree trimming, the exact same thing. Call your alderperson. You don't have to come out of your personal pocket to pay for a private contractor to tree trim. That's what you're paying for in your city taxes, in your property taxes. You call your alderperson and you request a tree that needs trimming, be it your own or any tree you see in the city that you feel is interfering with a telephone line or any such as obstruction, so long as it's not a personal backyard property. If it's a city tree on city property, the city will take care of that, and they will do so within time. The only waiting you need to do is after you've made the request, because those requests will be honored. I've made them myself, and my eyes have seen them. And if you don't know your alderperson's phone number, and you're unable to actually go into the office to make the request, you can call 311, the city service number, and ask that person that answers for your alderperson's office, or number one, they can take the report for you, and they can connect you directly to your alderperson's office, and or you can ask them for the phone number to your alderperson's office. My alderperson, 8th Ward Alderwoman Michelle Harris's office, the staff there has told me after I've made 311 requests, they've asked me if I could call their office to inform them of what 311 requests I've made. And sometimes I've made the request directly with them at their office.
Well,
So
we want to thank you for the information, the insight, because this is what this is all about. How do we help our
you're
own
welcome.
people? And
By
we definitely
doing
appreciate
what
it.
Ms. Lagana Ray said, working with the other people that we or someone has elected or that's been appointed to that office, you work with them. Believe you me, ma'am, who called, said we have to wait for our services. Yes, you do. That's only after you've made the request.
Thanks,
We cannot
Marguerite.
wait for the older people to just say, oh, there's a pothole here. Even if it's a hole that you see the size of a lemon in a garbage can or recycling bin, you yourself can call and make the request for that address to have it removed and replaced with a new one. It doesn't have to be that property owner or the person at that address where that garbage can or recycling bin is with the hole the size of a lemon. You can make the request. The city will replace it, will remove it and replace it, be it yours or someone else's, because I've done it myself and I've
Marguerite,
seen it. So
thank you so much. We got to get moving. I'm so sorry. We get close to that time. This hour goes by so quickly. Larry, please go ahead with what you were saying.
No, I think that we ought to have the chamber, the other institutions ought to have training on understanding procurement and making sure that even our legislators have a better insight where there has to be a legislative agenda where you bring in the experts to walk them through, because you can't fix a process if you don't understand the process.
Mm-hmm.
And there are more than even in construction, there's 101 ways to kill a subcontractor. I've been around, and I'm not that smart. It's just that I've been around long enough to hear and to understand and to ask the questions about why come this didn't happen, what was the reason, and understand how they use the law to sometimes neutralize us when we should be winning. They use the technicalities to prevent us from winning. So we just got to be better at this game. And that's what the chamber is trying to get across to people. You need strong Black chambers of commerce who are fighting, who understand the rules of engagement, who are pushing we want the state of Illinois to be the best state. I mean, we want, to have, the best leadership. That's our desire. But leadership has to be accountable, and we have to get results. Business is about results. We can't talk about we got good policy and that we did something historical. I was proud of the 50% increase. But when I took a look at the numbers, to my friends and legislators out there, the numbers are not reflected. Even though we have a 50% increase, we're not seeing that when it comes to the bottom line in participation. The numbers are still low, and that makes us vulnerable in any kind of way, no matter what party you're from. If people don't see results, and even though we celebrate some things, but they don't see results, and most things are based upon economics. If we're not participating economic, you can't hold our votes. You can't hold our attention. It's important. I'm saying this because I want us to be better than what we are. I don't want to have a 10-year conversation from now, because I may not be around, but somebody else is going to have the same conversation. Let's find out how we fix it. Let's challenge the Capital Building Board. Let's challenge the Department of Correction. Let's challenge every agency to be accountable. Let's work with Bruce Montgomery. There's another young lady with the Commission on Equity and Inclusion. but everybody has to pitch in, and we got to get better at this, LaDonna.
Absolutely. And just in working with the chamber myself, I have discovered that a lot of our chamber members have had access to procurement opportunities and contract opportunities. Can you highlight a few, or do we want to save that for another show? Because I'm always excited when we have our networking events, which we have one coming up at the end of this month, when people come together and they give their testimonies.
Yeah. Well, Donna, one thing we can be proud of from a chamber is that we've been able to impact procurement. When we were on the the BEP Council,
Hmm.
we were the ones who made sure that the sheltered market got on the table. We were the ones who pushed heavily to make sure it happened. We worked hard to get it done. We were the ones who challenged what we call requested exemption because, people were getting exempt. And I want the audience to hear this. There's what we call required exemption and requested exemption. And the statute says that the BEP Council are the ones who approve requested exemptions. There are hundreds of thousands of requested exemptions that's been requested years ago, and they should never have been granted. They should have never been granted. It's just another way of not having any minority goals on it. So sometimes they're just a little bit more clever how to neutralize us. The
Hmm.
fox likes chickens, and so does a wolf. The wolf just is going to come and get the chicken. The fox is going to be a little more clever to get the chickens, but they both eat chickens at the end of the day. So we have to make sure that we're as clever as everybody else in protecting our own interests. And that's what the chamber represents, is a voice for the voiceless in business, to be an advocate. That's why we have a political PAC. That's why we continue to push the agenda of inclusion, and we fight the fight on an ongoing basis. Every day we get up, we're fighting. When people call us and are getting treated unfairly, we're the group that has to go in there and call the agency out, call the general contractor out. And believe me, they know when the chamber calls, it's serious business. And we make a lot of things happen that would never, ever happen if we were not there. But we can do more than what we're doing. And you got to challenge us to do more. And all of us can do more.
How do we get people involved with the chamber to make sure that we can fully elevate the businesses that are, that are connected to us? Because just like yesterday, it was Liam's birthday, my 14-year-old son, and I intentionally went to a black-owned pizza place that we go to each and every week on pizza day. And the first thing that even your CEO of projects, which is Miss Janice Ivory, said was, "Why don't I have their information in our directory?" So I instantly emailed her to let her know that that particular establishment can be added to our directory. But what do people need to be doing?
People need to be actually reaching out and being a part. We have events. We're having an event at Dr. Rucker's place in May, I think May the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. But you can go on our website and you can come and network. Again, I want to give a shout out
May
to
29th. I had to jump on May 29th.
no. Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to give a shout out to D. Ruckers, Dr. Ruckers, who is the co chair of our construction committee. He will be leading the charge when it comes to the Capital Development Board, Department of Transportation, with BOA construction companies and others to make sure that we're having the right conversation, that we're not begging, asking people, like I told Department of Transportation, you're not doing any favors for us because highway infrastructure is funded by a motor fuel tax, which means that if you put gas in your car, you fund infrastructure. Those are facts. So we're not coming asking and begging anyone for anything. We have a right to participate where our dollars create the opportunity.
That's right. That's
That's
right.
only fair. And when we see institutions like Department of Corrections who have us locked up, we go to school districts where 65, 75% of the people are black. But when it comes to contracting, we ain't there, LaDonna. We have to fix that.
Well, another thing we have to fix, because we only have a few more minutes, I want to make sure that our audience knows that they need to get their real ID. The cutoff for that is May 7th. And what that is if you're planning on traveling without your passport, you will need to have a real ID with the star in the upper right hand corner in Illinois. It's in a circle. Other states have it differently in different animals or different elements. However, if you go to the TSA.gov website, you'll see what the requirements are. You can also go to your Secretary of State website as well, but that has to be done by the 7th. Otherwise, you will not be able to board a plane or should I say use transportation to leave the state without that real ID. So again, we're giving information as the Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. And I'm not sure if I haven't seen a commercial lately because they pushed this back in 2020 and then they postponed it because of COVID. It's been 5 years, y'all. So get your tails up and get to the Secretary of State or the DMV as they call it, and get your real ID. You have to have your birth certificate or a valid passport, maybe utility bill. Find out what those requirements are to get your real ID.
Hey, LaDonna, a little bit. This last comment is that I want to give a shout out because I think it's important when, I think Miss Collins, who's working in the healthcare space, we ought to, for those who may not know the party, Miss Collins, who's one of the representatives in Springfield, who's working to make sure there's fairness and equity. People support people who support you. Businesses contribute money to those who adopt policies that are fair. And I want to give a personal shout out to her for her leadership. And I'm telling all our business people to support her, to write a check, to make when you see her, shake her hand, make sure that the people are doing the right thing, that you acknowledge their presence. It's so important for our own welfare. We got to do a better job. We got to get smarter at this thing. And we'll continue to do the
Who are you
best we
speaking
can.
of? It's 10 o'clock. Who are you speaking of?
Miss Collins, I may butcher her name, but she is one of the leaders of the caucus, and I hear great things about her work and what she's doing. And I just want, when we come back on the next radio show, I'll give you some details in reference
Okay.
to who she is, a lot more details on it. But I know that she is representing our community in a very positive way. So a shout out to her. And like I said, all Black business people,
All right.
the Michael Suttons, the Millhouse, all of you, make sure
Miss
you
Ivory,
contribute to people doing the right
I
thing.
hate that I got to cut you off, man. I'm
I'm
so
too,
sorry. It's
I'm
10
too,
o'clock. This is VON. We got a hard stop at 10. That hour goes by so quickly. I want to thank everybody for listening. Don't forget to go to ilbcc.org. Get your membership on because membership has its benefits. We'll be back here next Saturday at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Central, guys. I'm LaDonna Ray signing off with Larry Ivory, the president and CEO
hey,
of the
LaDonna,
Illinois State Black Chamber of Commerce. You've been listening to the Wake Up Show Chicago. See you
LaDonna,
guys Monday, 3 o'clock.
LaDonna, LaDonna
Bye-bye.
Ray.
Get ready to wake up to the pulse of progress as we amplify voices, break barriers, and illuminate the path towards a more inclusive tomorrow. Follow us across the socials at The Wake Up Show Chicago. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. It's The Wake Up Show every Saturday morning at 9, where change begins with every sunrise. Welcome to The Wake Up Show Chicago.
That's the end?
The talk of Chicago is 1690 WVON, Sherwin, Chicago.
Caring for someone with Alzheimer's is tough, but there is help. This is Rufus Williams. The third annual African American Release the Silence Conference gives caregivers, families, and healthcare professionals information, resources, guidance, support, and it provides fellowship. It's Saturday, May 3rd at the Greenwood Oasis in Chicago. It's free, and I'll be your MC. The doors open at 8:30 a.m.
Registration is required. Call 1-800-272-3900. 1-800-272-3900. Powered by the Alzheimer's Association Illinois Chapter, WVON, media sponsor and proud partner.
Johns Hopkins University has found that just mild hearing loss doubles